Welcome to Early Adopter, the podcast where we help make AI your unfair advantage. I'm Jess, a marketing exec, chief jargon buster, and I help ground AI in your practical day-to-day.
And I'm Kyle. I live at the intersection of data, product, and strategy, and I do my best to turn the technical AI chaos into something you can actually use.
We go beyond the overhyped headlines and give you the unvarnished truth about AI, what's real, what's hype, and what actually matters for your business.
Every week, we simplify the complex, spotlight the risks, and give you practical tools to make smarter decisions as the landscape rapidly shifts around us.
From agents to commerce to prompt engineering and vibe coding, we deliver honest insights, actionable strategies, and zero gatekeeping.
Let's dive in.
This is Early Adopter. Welcome to Early Adopter, the podcast where we help make AI your unfair advantage. I'm Jess.
And I'm Kyle. And this week's going to be a little bit different. Rather than jumping into our weeks, we need to tell you something that probably feels a little un-early adopter of us right now. And we're actually going to take a break this week.
That is shocking. I know. We are going to be taking some time off for the holidays. We have been heads down on AI content since we launched this podcast in May without a break. And if you've been listening, you know the pace has been a lot, shall we say?
Almost an understatement. I think every single week is just a fire hose of information. Honestly, the holidays are the perfect time to really test some of the stuff we've been meaning to try out. I know you have some plans to test some tools. I have some AI tools I've bookmarked that I keep telling myself I would get to. I have a couple projects for some automations. So I think this is the moment for everyone to start playing around with a little bit of things while we're off.
But while we are out, we are not leaving you hanging. We are re-releasing some of our most popular episodes. These are the ones that people have requested. They're the ones that people have told us have actually changed how they work. So we want to make sure that everyone has the opportunity to listen to those ones.
And the data shows that they're the most popular. So we think these are the ones that you need to really cover in order to level up. So if you're new to the podcast, this is actually a great way to catch up. But if you've listened before, I think they're worth a re-listen, especially because some of these are really important for, how you're actually going to use AI and if you want to set yourself up for success in 2026. Perspective can change a lot of that. And with how rapidly everything moves, this is a great time.
So we will be back in early January with some fresh content and some fresh ideas. In the meantime, enjoy the re-releases, have a play around with some AI while we're away, and we will see you in January. In the meantime, just as a reminder, you can find us on Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, YouTube, basically everywhere. We are at early_adopter. Remember, no E in adopter. Yeah.
And if you've got an AI story or a question you want us to tackle when you're back, send it our way at hello@earlyadopter.ai. Remember, no E in the adopter. And until then, happy holidays, everyone.
Yes, happy holidays, and we will see you in the new year. So moving on to our topic for this week, we have been talking about this for a while, and it's finally time for us to tackle it. And this is the concept of Answer Engine Optimization, AEO. It's also known as AIO, GSO, GEO, conversational search, contextual search. It's got a lot of different names. For the sake of this podcast, we're calling it AEO. It's going to be quite an important topic, and there's been a lot more kind of buzz around it in the last couple of weeks. So that's why we wanted to talk about it.
I think when you first mentioned AEO to me back in, 9 months ago, 6 months ago. Well, I think we were calling it GEO then. AEO, I think, is like maybe a month or so ago. I'm not sure.
It changes so quickly.
It changes a lot, which is why I kind of thought it was just another marketing buzzword, right?
Yeah.
But the more we've looked into it, especially this week, dove into the technical side, this is really fundamentally changing how search works.
Yeah, absolutely. And, a lot of people still haven't quite caught on to this yet. There are some reports that are showing that 60% of searches now end without a click. That's from a recent report that HubSpot did. And if you know HubSpot, it's a big CRM platform, sales platform. And this is exactly in their wheelhouse. Essentially, it means that AI engines are becoming the new Google. This is one of the reasons why Google is kind of in panic mode at the minute. But honestly, a lot of people still haven't heard of this concept.
Yeah, I think that is one of the problems is we haven't come up with a proper nomenclature yet.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, if search, Google is search, then ChatGPT is AEO or answer
Yep.
engine or whatever have you. And
Yep.
let's be honest, like we all joke now about, oh, let me go ask chat. But actually, that's where people are going to
Well,
find answers.
that's exactly it. And I think we'll talk a little bit more about the consumer
Yeah.
behavior changes because that is a really, really big part of this.
Yeah. Because if you think traditional SEO was a game changer for 20, 25 years of businesses are still trying to figure out. So now we have AEO. It's an evolutionary step on SEO. How long is it going to take us to figure that out?
Especially because a lot of people are still kind of wrapping their heads around this. So that
Hmm.
was actually a nice segue with your little talk about SEO, because I think let's do a little bit of an SEO refresher because
Hmm.
AEO builds on those foundations. So as a reminder, traditional SEO, which is search engine optimization, is all about making your website more visible in search engine results. So for the past 20 years, it's been about keyword research. You create content around those keywords, you build backlinks from other sites and technical optimizations. And all of that helps Google understand and rank your pages. So the goal is pretty straightforward. It's to rank as high as possible for relevant search terms so that people click through to your website.
Hmm.
It's pretty straightforward. But answer engine optimization, AEO, is kind of at its very core, it's quite different, although it builds on those SEO foundations. So instead of optimizing to show up in a list of search results, you're optimizing your content to show up in AI generated responses. So,
Hmm.
think of the AI overview that a lot of people have seen and actually kind of hate um, in, in Google. I had someone ask me how to switch it off the other day. Um, or, ChatGPT or Perplexity, like all of those sorts of things. So instead of trying to rank number one in traditional
Hmm.
search results, you're now trying to become the source that AI engines quote when someone asks a question. So it is
Yeah.
quite a different approach.
So where traditional SEO was, as you mentioned, keywords, backlinking, between
Mhm.
your different pages, and you could kind of see yourself moving up in those rankings. All of the goal of that was as you get higher in the rankings, you get more clicks because people didn't scroll down super far, right? They
Yep.
would click the top two or three.
Yep.
AEO now flips that. It's about getting cited, not about ranking. So SEO focused on keywords. AEO focuses on answering questions directly. And where SEO required you to win that ranking game, AEO is about becoming the source that these AI engines like ChatGPT or Claude or even Google's AI overview choose to cite when people ask questions. So again, instead of hoping to win that single number one blue link at the top of the Google keyword, you want your content mentioned positively across many, many sources that the AI pulls from.
Exactly. And I talked a couple weeks ago when we spoke to Eric about my favorite Google pizza glue story. And this is exactly it, because the question that the person asked, which was, how do I get cheese to stick to pizza? There is very little information about that. So Google pulled from the only source that it could find, which was Reddit. And that's why you ended up with that ridiculous response. So that is essentially the concept. You're just trying to become that one-sided source.
Hmm.
And it means that people are getting their answers right in the AI
Hmm.
overview. So we're really looking at a massive, massive shift in how people are searching and how people are communicating and finding out information.
Yeah, I think that could be potentially kind of terrifying
Yeah.
if you're still trying to drive website traffic, because we talk about this 60% of searches don't result in a click to your website from that blue link. So if you're not getting traffic, what do you do?
Yeah, absolutely. And there is a podcast episode that I highly, highly recommend anyone listen to if they want a little bit more information about this. We'll definitely put this in the show notes. But there is a podcast called Lenny's Pod, and
Mhm.
he does an incredibly useful interview with a guy called Ethan Smith, who is the CEO of a company called Graphite. And he is really like the authority in
Mm,
this space. But they work with Webflow,
mm.
which is a website builder. And they've been finding that the traffic from AI engines was converting at 6 times the rate of
See,
normal Google traffic. So it's much, much, much more effective. And we'll talk a little bit
that's
about why that's effective later.
yeah, that 6 times is incredible. I mean, I was kind of blown away by that stat. Even 2x or 3x would be something to
Yeah.
take notice of, but 6x is obviously like a fundamental shift.
Yeah. But it actually really makes sense if you think about someone's user journey, because
Mhm.
if someone's asking ChatGPT what's the best CRM for a marketing agency that integrates with HubSpot and has advanced reporting, and it
Mhm.
recommends your specific product, that person is much further down the funnel. So they're much more
Mhm.
likely to convert because they're looking for something that is really, really, really specific. So if you are providing those services,
Right.
then it makes sense that someone's going to be much more likely to convert to purchase, because they're already, rather than just Googling, best CRM platforms, they're already looking for something specific, and you tick all of those boxes. So they've
Mhm.
essentially had a consultation with an AI that understands their really specific needs and kind of serves it up on a platter.
Yeah. For better or worse, right? We trust these AI tools almost
Yeah,
implicitly.
we
And
do. We
so,
do.
you're as soon as you get, hey, this is the best CRM, you're qualified. You're like in the
Yep.
funnel, you're ready to go, which,
Yep.
we talk about trust issues all the time and we'll get more to that. But
Yeah. So when it comes to the actual technical perspective, how are these AI engines actually deciding what to quote? Like how does the technical side work?
so when you ask ChatGPT a question or any other LLM, it often uses a retrieval layer to pull relevant information. When you see it on the little thing, say, searching the web,
Mm,
this is a retrieval layer that they've added. It's a big improvement over the last couple of years so that it starts to bring in relevant information. It doesn't have that cutoff date like we've talked
yep.
about. So this could be a web search via Google or its own crawlers or Bing search, a lot of different ways to do it. It could come from knowledge sources or indexes like Wikipedia, which is a really strong, relevant, authoritative source. Or it could connect, to a browser like its own ChatGPT browsing mode. So once it's then retrieved the relevant information, it synthesizes an answer from those retrieved sources. But it's not just the top one, but a blend of the information retrieved. So it'll often quote across several trusted sources.
So it essentially means that ChatGPT is going away and doing its own Google search, right?
Yeah,
But
exactly.
but so does ranking still matter then if it's essentially going away and doing its own?
Yeah, I think this is where it gets really interesting. And perhaps to the relief of everyone who's spent, the last 20 years learning SEO, yes, ranking still matters, but only to a certain extent. So AEO is going to stand on the shoulders of SEO, but it really starts to add some unique layers to it or kind of like its own really important step. And so what I mean by that is, if Bing or Google rankings are used by the LLM to fetch sources, higher ranked content is more likely to be in that candidate pool of information to draw from. But, many retrieval systems rely heavily on Wikipedia and major publishers for ranking signals as well. And those give it like authority, recency, and relevance, all very important as we talk about for an LLM, because, again, that's a lot of the context.
I think this is also where a lot of these publisher partnerships start to come into play as well,
Totally.
because if they've got a partnership deal with the New York Times or something, then they're going to be pulling from an authority, which is
Yes.
a good thing, because they also will tend to pull significantly from something like Reddit, where as we
Yeah.
know, the information can sometimes be a little iffy
Yeah.
sometimes. But
Well, it's not published, it's not cited, whereas these, major publishers are.
yep, exactly. Pizza glue. That's all I'm going to say. Pizza glue. Um,
Exactly.
so to sum that up quickly, ranking does still matter in AEO, but in a slightly different way. So you
Hmm.
can kind of think of it as like an entry ticket. So if your page doesn't rank at all, it might never get into the retrieval pool that ChatGPT or that Claude pulls from. But once
Hmm.
you're in the pool, the AI doesn't care if you're at number 1 or number 10. It just cares about which content
Hmm.
is clear, factual, and easy to quote. So the SEO kind of gets you into the room, but AEO is what makes the AI actually call your name. So SEO absolutely does still matter.
Hmm.
You still have to put the effort in with your SEO, but
Hmm.
AEO, as you said, kind of adds another layer to it.
Yeah, I love that room analogy because it's
Yeah.
perfect, right? It gets you in the room, but you still need to be relevant to get called out. So to kind of contrast this in another way, SEO works by helping these search engines crawl and index your site, and then signaling that relevance and authority through things like the keywords and the site structure and all the things we talked about. The search engine's ranking algorithm weighs those signals to decide where your page shows up in those 1 to 10 results. Versus if we compare that to AEO, to be cited in AI answers, you need clear, fact based content structured in a really understandable question and answer form. So it's like really clear what the data is, and then it needs to be supported by consistent mentions across trusted sources, not just your website, but lots of other places as
Mm.
well. And signals like, things that make your answers really easy to parse.
You mean parse in terms of a data perspective, right?
Sorry, yeah, let me
Yeah.
say that. Basically, it the answers really easy to digest or to like, break apart.
Okay. But this is why SEO agencies have been so popular because they improve search results by optimizing your site in general, and they
Hmm.
create those keyword aligned content, and they build those backlinks to boost your relevance and trust with search engines. If you've ever worked with any sort of like content agency or anything like that, like I've worked with an agency that did a lot of content a couple of years ago, and it's all about the keywords, sometimes to the detriment of the actual content. It's a real balancing act.
Yeah. Yeah, because at the end of the day, the expectation probably was people aren't really reading the content. You just want the website traffic,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
But that's actually a great point because in contrast, AEO agencies or, anyone working on AEO, you need to, in order to improve results, you have to shape really clear, quotable answers. Like the content does need to be really good. And then you need to spread that content across trusted sources like blogs, forums, review sites, anywhere that people might look for, relevant information, and then structure that content in a way that AI engines can easily retrieve and cite it. So now all of a sudden the content is super.
Yeah. So instead of focusing on one really strong piece of content or really, dialing in on the website and making all of those keyword heavy
Mhm.
pieces of content or whatever, you kind of need to be everywhere. Is that right?
Totally. And you need to be authentically everywhere, if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yep.
So, what I think is great for our audience as we think about this, it's an opportunity to level the playing field again. So, with traditional SEO, let's say you're a startup going against big established players spending tons of money on this, with massive domain authority. They've been in it for a long time. I mean, you're kind of screwed to go up that. You're
Yeah.
never going to get, number one, number two in those keyword rankings.
No.
But with AEO, you can get mentioned in, a relevant Wikipedia article, a blog, maybe even a Reddit thread if you're so inclined. But that could be the difference between you starting to appear in AI answers immediately.
Yeah. So it might seem really easy, but again, that keyword is authentically, because something
Mhm.
like a platform like Reddit will know very easily and very quickly if you are spamming just
Mhm.
to get noticed. So the word authentically is quite important. The AI engines are getting really good at detecting spam. Reddit has very strong community guidelines and moderation, and they just don't take kindly to people who are very transparently selling. They will shut you down
Yeah.
really quickly. But if you're genuinely helpful, if you're actually helping people solve problems, and it just so happens that you talk about your podcast or, whatever it is that you're trying to I'm just saying, it's something but if we as early adopter were on Reddit talking to people about AI for small businesses, that's how
Mm,
we would start getting
yeah.
involved in Reddit, because we're having those conversations and helping people out
Right.
through authentic content, and we're solving problems and actually providing value.
One quick little aside, and this might be something to drill into later. Just as an anecdotal observation, I'm seeing a lot of AI generated content being put out there, especially when
Yes.
referencing companies. So I think people are starting to cotton onto this and are starting to try to like put a lot of like, oh, hey, I'm solving this thing and here's my company if you're interested in, so that they show
Yeah.
up in these AI results. But to your point, you see a lot of people calling them out like, oh, this is shit generated content. Like we got to
Yeah.
get this out of here. But, so there really is that kind of trade-off between, trying to rank there, being authentic so that people aren't calling you out and kind of damaging your brand. And then also like what are the moderators doing for some of these subreddits to like kick those people out? Because I've seen a lot of like someone get posted and then get removed if they're getting too spammy. So Reddit's a really interesting kind of little microcosm to see how this is playing out.
Totally.
Yeah.
And for exactly this sort of reason, as people start to cotton on to AEO,
Hmm.
it's going to become a bigger and bigger issue. So when it comes to the content that works best for AEO is pretty straightforward and factual. So just really clear, simple statements that directly answer questions. You just want very clear, like, Slack integrates with over 2,000 apps, or, Zoom
Hmm.
supports up to 1,000 participants. Just very clear, quotable facts that AI can easily pull and use when it's responding.
I think that brings up a really good question. What actually makes that content more likely to get picked up?
The basics still matter. This is why the basics of SEO still matter for AEO. So it's things like clear headings, natural language. Natural language is an important one. That is, the natural language essentially means just the way that we're talking right now, and how people would ask a natural question, as opposed to,
Drop that MBA buzzword speak,
yeah, exactly, exactly. So it's content that sounds like how people actually talk, rather than just very keyword heavy
Hmm.
robot speak, which in my opinion is a problem with SEO, is
Thank
that it
thank
gets,
God, right?
yeah, it gets too keyword
Mhm.
heavy.
How many
And
times do you show up on a website and you read what they
yeah,
do and you're like, I have no
exactly.
idea what you do because it's so keyword heavy.
Yep. It's a real problem.
Yeah, now we get to basically say, hey, this is what we actually do and explain it like I'm five. That's gonna be
Yeah.
great for me.
I love
For
explaining like
us,
it
for
fine.
us simple folk over here, we need the simple answers. Just give me the details.
So there's also something called structured data markup, and you can go back and listen to our episode about data where we talk about structured data. But honestly, the biggest thing is just writing like a human for humans. So this
Hmm.
is where something like AI slop starts to become an issue.
Yeah, and this kind of ties into conversational search, right?
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So if you think about how search behavior has changed, someone, 5 years ago, someone may have typed something like running shoes for men into
Hmm.
Google, right? Just 3 or 4 words. But now they're having full conversations with the AI. So they might say something like, I need waterproof running shoes for men that are under $150 for marathon training. What are the best options? When I was searching for furniture a couple of months ago, I actually used this a lot because I was
Mm.
scouring the internet trying to find something really specific, and I would get into a back and forth conversation with chat where I would tell it, this is exactly
Hmm.
what I'm looking for. It needs to look like this. I need to do, this, this, this. And it came back with some okay options. I didn't end up going with any of them, but at least it kind of widened my net a little
Yeah.
bit. So it's just much more of that back and forth. And it's a much longer, like, that's a
Hmm.
15, 20 word query instead of a 3 word keyword search. So it's like the difference between a telegram, like the Pony Express telegram, or an actual conversation that we would have now.
Yeah, and the user journey is very different. So,
Very
you
different.
know, you're all are always be iterating concept
Yep.
of if you didn't find what you liked after that first 15, 20 word query, you're
Yep.
asking it clarifying questions and giving it more context and more detail of what you're looking for. And all of a sudden, actually then if you take that entire context window, now it's like 1,000 words of you explaining what
Mm.
you're looking for. Very different than that 3 keyword search. So, I remember learning how to Google back in the day, using quotes for direct keyword match and stuff like that. All of that's kind of irrelevant now in this always be iterating mindset.
Absolutely. And then you also have to factor in voice search, which
Mm.
amplifies things even more. So, like, if I'm driving and I ask my phone about the weather or something, I don't say weather New York. I would say, what's the weather going to be like in New York this weekend? I'm thinking about having a barbecue or something like that. That's how people talk. They don't just say weather New York.
First off, love that. Hope you do have a barbecue this weekend.
I don't think
Like,
I will, sadly. I don't think the weather
where's
in
my
London
invite?
is, I mean, I know for a fact it's gonna rain tomorrow, so,
Hey, I
actually,
used
that's
to
true.
barb I
You
used to
did
barbecue in
barbecue
the
in the
rain.
rain. That is very
No
true.
excuses. Play like a champion.
I don't think you want me to barbecue, Kyle. I will charcoal any item that I put on that barbecue. I am not known for my cooking skills.
Fair enough. Fair enough. All right, but let's get to the heart of this. So, if AI is giving people answers directly, how are businesses supposed to get traffic? We've spent the last 25 years
Yeah.
traffic, traffic, traffic. Um, and then more importantly, like, how do I make money if I'm not getting any traffic?
Well, that is the billion-dollar question, and that's exactly why people need to know about AEO and be aware of it. If you think of it like when you would go to websites, right? That's a much more like individual, time-consuming process, and you're probably going to give up halfway because you're tired of clicking on various links. Now you're getting all the information within the chat. And
Mhm.
so it's going to become like a much more natural process. But what we're starting to see work in practice, and again, this is all incredibly, incredibly new. Even within the
Right.
last couple of months, it's really kicked off. So, this might change, but this is what we're seeing right now that's
Mhm.
working. Brand authority. So even if someone doesn't click through, if you're being cited as an expert on the topic, that builds massive brand equity. So people start to look you up, or people start to trust you as an authority because they've seen you as the expert answer multiple
Mhm.
times. So that's a really big thing. And then second, while AI searches are becoming zero click, and by zero click, I mean everything's happening within that chat, what I was just talking
Mhm.
about. Complex purchasing decisions are still driving website visits. So for a B2B buyer, you're going to want to verify information. You're going to want to dig deeper before you make
Mhm.
decisions. So while you might use the AI or the AI search as point you in the right direction, or kind of make you aware of some tools that maybe you weren't aware of before, you're still going to go to that website just to get more information, to get case
Yeah.
studies, whatever the case may be.
Which is super interesting because,
Yeah.
effectively the people who do click through from an AI recommendation are far more qualified. We
Yep.
talk about like the funnel.
Yep.
You're basically been pre-vetted by the AI. You already know about the company now and it answered your direct question. So we should see really high conversion rates from traffic coming from AI engines.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is really key. AEO is becoming a channel. It's not
Mhm.
replacing all channels. So this is why you do still need traditional SEO, paid ads, organic, social, all of that. But if you
Mhm.
ignore it, it means that you're missing customers who are already making purchase decisions inside the AI engines, because that is becoming increasingly common.
Okay, let's take a look at a concrete example of how this is playing out. So, Target just
Yep.
announced they're completely rethinking their search strategy around what they call generative commerce. Oh, love that buzzword.
Yeah,
But,
exactly.
this isn't just tweaking their SEO, it's a total shift in how they think about product discovery.
This is a really interesting use case. And I'm going to caveat this with, I did try and find a use case for a
Mm.
smaller business, because Target obviously, has a lot of money behind it. They have people that and agencies that they can throw at this sort of thing, but
Mhm.
they just don't exist yet. I really struggled
Mm.
to find a use case that was a startup or a smaller business, because it's just still such early days with a lot of this. But in the
Mm.
Target instance, so instead of optimizing individual product pages for keywords like winter coats, women, which is what they would previously have done, they're creating
Mhm.
comprehensive content experiences that kind of walks through the entire customer journey. So if someone asks an AI, what's the best winter coat for commuting to work in Chicago that's enough for a client meeting and under $200, Target wants to be that answer. So again, it's getting much, much more specific. So they're
Mhm.
building what they're calling contextual product stories. So this is content that doesn't just list the features, but talks about how the product fits into real world scenarios, which is really interesting. So
Mm.
their winter coat content will now include things like works in temperatures down to 15 degrees Fahrenheit, or machine washable, or you can wear over business casual clothing, or what the sizes are. So it's giving a much fuller picture, rather than just, again, that really keyword heavy product description that it would have had previously.
Yeah, this makes the product person to me super excited. And I think we've kind of mentioned this in the past, why like in your Shopify store, if you have one of
Hmm.
those, your
Yep.
product descriptions need to be a lot more detailed and
Yep.
descriptive. This is where, AI is going to find that information and use the context. It's not just going to look at the name of your product, it's going to look at that description to figure out if it's relevant. But I think what makes me excited is all of that work, and especially in like a B2B relevance, all that work about customer journeys and customer pain points and how you
Yep.
solve a thing is now going to get used by the AI. So that's kind of exciting.
Totally. And they're really structuring that information so that AI engines can easily parse. Again, there's that word, and quote it. So according to Retail Dive, which is a industry trade magazine for the retail industry, early results are showing that customers who discover Target product through AI recommendations have a 47% higher purchase intent
Wow.
compared to traditional results. But I think one thing that's really smart about Target's approach is that they're not just optimizing for the initial discovery, they're thinking about that entire conversation, again, that entire customer journey. that someone might have with an AI about getting ready for winter or planning, a work wardrobe or finding gifts. They really want to be part of that whole dialogue, not
Mm,
just for one product query. So it's a very interesting, very different approach to the traditional SEO
mm.
product discovery.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds like they're treating these, an AI engine almost like a personal shopping assistant.
Absolutely. And we will definitely at some point talk about Walmart and their super
Mm,
agents because this is very relevant for AEO, but
mhm.
we're not going to get into that today. Just know that we've got a whole case study just about that. But the results are speaking for themselves because they're seeing these higher conversion rates because by the time
Mm.
someone gets to the site, they're much further along in that decision-making process already.
Yeah, and I think what a lot of businesses are missing about where this is headed is, we're not just talking about better qualified traffic to your website.
Right, because the end game is not about sending people to your site at all. The ultimate goal, and this is what the platforms are working towards, is building a
Hmm.
complete end-to-end purchasing experience. So,
Yeah.
as an example, you can see where this is going purely if you look at the partnerships.
Mm.
Perplexity already has a PayPal partnership for in-platform buying, and that is where this is going.
Yeah. So, I mean, that's kind of wild. I mean, imagine, I think this
Mhm.
is the scenario we're headed towards, right?
Yep.
Someone, or, you go into ChatGPT, you say, I need a project management tool for a 15-person marketing team with Slack integration and XYZ features, but I need it to be under $50 per user per month or whatever your criteria may be. ChatGPT again gives you three options. You pick one, you enter your payment details inside of ChatGPT, and now
Yep.
boom, you're a customer. I never even visited that website.
Yep. So if your product wasn't mentioned in that conversation, if your product wasn't those three options that were provided,
Hmm.
you didn't just lose a website visit. So you didn't even just lose that top of funnel traffic. You lost the
Mm,
entire sale. So you lost that conversion. And there is no opportunity for your paid ads to retarget them. There's no chance for your sales team to follow up. There is
mhm.
no second chance at all because all of it, the search, the discovery, and the purchase all happened within the AI search engine,
Wild.
completely upending everything that
Hmm.
we know about traditional marketing.
Yeah, that the traditional funnel has
Yep.
completely disappeared and you don't even know about it. You don't even know what
Yep.
happened, right?
Yep.
So the AI conversation becomes the entire buyer journey from, like you said, discovery all the way to purchase. And you had no idea that you lost out.
Exactly. So that is why AEO, God, it's such a hard one to say. That's why AEO optimization is so critical because it's not just about brand awareness. It's about being present at the exact moment that someone makes that purchasing decision. And that moment is increasingly happening within these AI platforms.
Yeah. So when we talk about businesses getting 6 times higher conversion rates from AI traffic, that's actually going to be probably the last generation to see that metric. Future customers, when we get to this end game, there might never be a trackable click or traffic at all.
Yeah. The purchase happens entirely in the conversation. And if you're not part of that conversation, you are invisible essentially to that customer segment entirely, which is absolutely not what you want. So that's why we wanted to talk about this. It's so,
Mhm.
so, so important to
Yeah.
be thinking about this.
And so the data person inside of me focusing on measurement for the last however many years is, maybe dying a little bit inside.
Yeah.
But, what are the tools? What does the measurement side look like? How do we even track this stuff?
So that is one of the biggest challenges right now. Traditional metrics like organic clicks become less relevant when your content's being quoted in AI responses. So you're going to need to start keeping track of things like share of voice in
Mm,
AI answers. So how many times are you mentioned? Branded mention frequency, and what Ethan Smith, who's the founder of Graphite and did the Lenny's podcast, it's what he's calling citation optimization. So like just how often you're
mm,
cited. There are definitely some new tools that are emerging. So Graphite, this company, has an AEO tracker. That's one of the reasons why this guy is the authority
mhm,
on it. And I do highly recommend listening to that
mm.
podcast because it is really interesting. Um, and there are a couple of other companies that are building AI visibility metrics, but it's still such early days that there actually isn't a ton of tracking and measurement options quite yet. Yeah.
There's obviously ways to see traffic coming from AI bots, although sometimes that is hidden or identified as unknown if they scrub headers and stuff. But, still traffic from an AI bot could mean thousands of mentions in AI answers. So you might see one AI bot come to you for answers, but that could be, there could be an exponential amount of like, let's call it traffic that you're getting from that. So for our listeners who are feeling overwhelmed by yet another thing they need to master, and also I got to say, something that feels a little bit like a black box, right?
Yeah.
What's your advice? What do you start doing today?
I think a lot of it is just starting with your expertise. So pick one area where you genuinely know more about the topic than other people and create really helpful, clear content around the questions that people ask about that topic. So again, it's what I was just talking about with, if we were to go onto Reddit and start talking to people about, in the small business forum about
Mm-hmm.
how to use AI, that would be us building up our citations, building up our expertise, and
Mm-hmm.
and starting to be able to get quoted a little bit more. But again, it's all about the authenticity. It's all about you
Mm-hmm.
sharing your expertise in a way that brings value. But don't try and boil the ocean. A lot of people haven't even heard of this yet. So let's break down how you actually do this. And we're going to walk through these three main pillars. And then,
Mm-hmm.
so let's start with on-site optimization.
Yeah, and we start there because your website is the foundation. It's still the start of everyone's consumer journey when they're dealing with you directly. But and as we kind of talked about last time, it's not like SEO suddenly doesn't matter. We're sitting on the shoulders of SEO with AEO.
Yep, that's right. So SEO still matters for AEO because if your pages don't rank at all in the traditional search, they might not get into the retrieval pool that
Mhm.
ChatGPT or any of the other AI search engines pull from.
But what are some of the nuances, Jess, around on-site optimization for AEO versus traditional SEO with backlinking and all of that?
So the biggest difference is the long tail. And by that, I mean that the average number of words in a ChatGPT query is around 25 words versus
Mm.
Google, which is around 6 words. So people are asking much longer, more conversational questions. And this is one of the reasons why we talk about conversational search, because it's that kind of back and forth like a natural conversation versus what we
Mhm.
traditionally have used for search. So instead of a search query like accounting tool, they're asking what's good accounting software for a small business that needs to handle
Mhm.
multiple currencies and it doesn't require a finance degree to use.
Yeah, and traditional keyword research tools don't capture those queries because many of them have never been searched on Google before. So the long tail is enormous with conversational search.
So let's kind of put this into an actual framework now because we love a framework. So
We
so
do.
step yeah, we really do. So step 1, let's call it question mining. So you need to identify what questions people are actually asking about your product or your service. And there are several sources that you can look at for that, but essentially what this allows you to do is to start to get an idea of what questions you can
Mhm.
address when you are creating content, because otherwise how do you know what you should be responding to if you don't know what the questions are going to be?
Yeah. So some of those sources are all the questions that exist somewhere out in the world outside of your website. So these can be sales calls, customer support tickets. This can be Reddit forums. You could go to G2 or Gartner or some of these places where people are giving reviews and kind of overall views of your business.
Yeah, and actually your sales calls are probably gold for this sort of thing. This is why it's really important to have this unstructured data that we talk about in our in
80% of
our
your data is unstructured.
exactly. And we talked about it in our data episodes, but this is exactly the sort of data that is perfect to pull from
Mhm.
because it's going to give you an idea of what questions prospects ask repeatedly. What
Mhm.
objections do they raise? What features do they ask about? What issues are you constantly coming across?
Yeah, customer support tickets are a gold
Mm.
mine too. What are people confused about? What are they getting tripped up on? What are they unable to solve? What do they need help with? So if you have a customer support tool that you use to capture all of this or a chatbot on your site, go through those logs and look at that. These are often very specific long tail questions that again are going to be perfect for recreating in some form of chat GPT.
And then, of course, you've got your Reddits, your industry forums, anywhere where people will naturally discuss the problems that your product solves. That's going to be a good place to go because, especially Reddit. And we'll talk more about Reddit later.
I think another good trick is take your existing SEO keywords
Mm.
and transform them into questions. So, a quick hack, give them to ChatGPT, ask it to generate 20 variations of questions people might ask based on the keywords that you're already buying or the keywords that have proven to be really valuable for your business. It's actually really good at this because it understands how people naturally phrase conversational queries.
So once you've done your question mining, then we move on to step 2, which is where you create comprehensive quotable content. And this is where the approach really differs significantly from traditional content marketing. Each page should target hundreds of questions, not just one keyword. So the more questions you answer, the better. And I know like this seems like a lot, but it is actually very important.
It's a great like customer journey exercise to go through. Think of it like you're having conversation with someone about your product. When they ask you one question, you're going to answer that, and then they're naturally going to ask you 3 or more follow-up questions. So your content should anticipate and answer all of those potential questions.
So if you look at like a product management tool example, so something like, let's pretend we're monday.com, right? Your your page shouldn't just say we're a project management tool. That actually doesn't really answer the questions.
Mhm.
It should answer, what features do you have? What integrations do you support? What's your pricing? How does it compare to alternatives? Like there's quite a
Mhm.
long list of questions that it should be answering. But again, these are all questions that you will have encountered at some point within your company's lifespan. So it exists. It's just about finding those questions.
And the really critical part, if you do go through and do this exercise, you want to make sure you have clear factual statements that directly answer questions. So, not a lot of marketing buzzwords and things that don't really make sense, which I show up on websites and I go, what are they
I
talking
know.
about? Right. But things like, supports integrations with over 2,000 apps, including, and then list out like the top 10 or 20, Slack, Gmail, Salesforce, whatever it may be. Another good example is works in temperatures down to 15 degrees Fahrenheit. If you're, I'm not sure what example that would be good for, but it would be really easy and really specific for an AI to quote that.
Well, I think you'll find, Kyle, that that would be great if you were selling a winter coat, for example. So that
Or
is
a sleeping
exactly,
bag.
or a sleeping bag. There you go. So that's a great product description
Hmm.
example.
Exactly.
So, just saying something really vague like we integrate with all your favorite tools, that's really useless for an AI because the AI needs to answer a specific question. And
Hmm.
also, natural language, which is the way that we're talking back and forth right now, is critical for AI because this is how AI interacts. Write like you're talking to a person, not like you're just stuffing a website with keywords for the search algorithm, which is something that a lot of websites actually really suffer from right now.
Yeah.
And, the AI needs to be able to parse and understand your content conversationally rather than just keyword based.
This is why I have so much hope for this AEO world because I mean, it's true. How many times do you go to a website and you read the descriptions and it's marketing buzzword, but what it really is keywords. They're
Mhm.
keyword farming because they're
Yep.
trying to basically stuff the litter box with high SEO ranking. But when I read it conversationally, I have no clue what you're doing, right? And I have to
Yeah.
like go to solutions and products and case studies. And I have to try to figure out, okay, what the heck is this thing? Whereas I think in this new AEO world, you're finally going to have people saying, like, we do this thing, we integrate with those things. And you're actually going to have like real words, not this buzzwordy, like explain like I'm 5. I would love the world just to switch towards this. And
Oh,
I think
I know.
AEO is going to maybe force that shift. And don't forget, structured data still matters.
Yeah. So
Clear headings.
unstructured data is important, but
Mhm.
so is your structured data.
Yes. So clear headings, bullet points where appropriate, but also numbers,
Mm,
statistics, clear
yeah.
ROI figures, super helpful because you're probably going to have people asking, what is the ROI of this?
AI loves a good statistic, and it's like one of the things that it's always hallucinating. So to actually have a legit
Exactly.
stat is really useful. But can
Mhm.
we just quickly demystify? I'm going to buzz my jargon buzzer. Can we just talk about what a schema markup is? Because I think some people hear that don't actually know what it means. So what is a schema markup?
Yeah, fair enough. I appreciate the buzzer. Yeah, and it's not super technical. A schema markup is just adding labels to your content that tells the machine or the crawler, this is a price, or this is a product name, this is availability. So you're kind of just giving it little markers so that it knows the context. Those recipe cards that show up in
Hmm.
Google with like cooking time and ingredients, that's schema markup in action.
Okay. So all of this means that instead of having your AI having to guess what information is what, you're explicitly labeling it. Is that right?
Exactly. So if you're on Shopify or WordPress for your website builder, that's a lot of that is built in. They will do the schema markup for you. If you have a custom site, your developer can add it. You don't need to become an expert. Just know it exists and make sure that your developer is building that into things that they create. So just ask them, do we have this set up? I think honestly, the most important thing is just writing really clear, comprehensive answers to real questions people have. The schema markup is helpful to tell the machine in the background what it is, but it's kind of a hack. If clear content is going to be the most essential.
So you know how we said a while back when we were doing our episodes about prompt engineering, that really prompt engineering is just fancy wording for good communication.
Yeah.
And I think, again, that's what it boils down to, right? This is the exact same concept.
Mhm.
And I think this is kind of a running theme with AI is that it's all about clear communication, good briefing, just giving
Yeah.
it the background and the context that it needs, because that is how the AI works.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think
Yeah,
that's really key.
And the schema is a nice to have, but what you're saying, clarity in your communication is the must have.
Exactly.
Okay, so your next critical step is to optimize your help center. This is something that kind of surprised me, but I think makes total sense. Your help center or your knowledge base is critical for AEO because people are asking these AI engines really specific questions about whether products can do what it needs to do. So asking very specific tasks or functions. Can this CRM export data to BigQuery, right? That's a very specific question. You're really only going to answer that in your knowledge hub where you've tried to answer that for someone specifically. Or, does this accounting software handle multi-currency transactions? You probably haven't put that on your website traditionally. That's probably sitting somewhere in technical documentation. But if it's not sitting somewhere, then you're not going to show up in the ChatGPT result.
I think these granular questions are often answered in help centers or in FAQs, sorts of little questions. That is essentially this as well. And that sort of information often sits in those sorts of FAQs, not on the marketing page, or a product description page. And that might be the only, you in this particular instance might be the only source answering that really specific, obscure question, which means that you could really own that query entirely.
So that was the first pillar, and it's very focused around your website, right? This second pillar that we're going to get into is offsite citation building. And this is really where AEO starts to diverge from traditional SEO. And I think it's kind of exciting. So with traditional SEO, early stage companies have had trouble competing because they don't have domain authority. They may not have the same budgets for, keywords, what have you. But with AEO, you can get mentioned in a Reddit thread like we talk about, or you can be talked about, elsewhere on high domain authority websites and start appearing in AI answers immediately. So it's a really great opportunity to democratize mentions.
And do you want to quickly explain what domain authority is? Because I think a lot of people might not know. I'm going to put you on the spot here and ask that question. Sorry.
Yeah. If I was going to summarize domain authority, it's really a SEO metric kind of historically, and it's the ability to predict or mathematically quantify a website's potential to rank in search engine results. But it's really useful for understanding a site's overall strength. And it's not necessarily a Google ranking factor. Like, it doesn't directly impact your rankings, but a high domain authority can be built by earning, a lot of link backs from other authoritative websites.
It's a way of Google understanding that you're a real website.
Exactly.
That's kind of the other, that's the
Much
easiest.
better.
That's the
Much
easiest
better.
way. But it
better.
basically just allows Google to know that you're not a spam site or
Yeah.
that you're not a fake website. There's a reason why it's authority. So that is what it is essentially.
It's not directly linked to showing up as the first result, but a higher domain authority will mean you rank higher.
So this is an important point because this is actually where smaller businesses or startups can really win with AEO, because SEO and things like domain authority often need a lot of money or a lot of expertise thrown at them. Especially now, 20 years in, maybe not 20 years ago when, SEO was kind of first starting to get off the ground, but now it's very difficult to rank on the first page of Google. And that is because these big companies kind of own that
Hmm.
space. But with AEO, we're still in the phase where earlier stage companies can win, and you can win pretty quickly just by getting mentioned in
Hmm.
a Reddit thread, or especially if it's an area of expertise where there might not be a lot of conversation about it yet.
Yeah.
So it's a much easier quick win than having to
Hmm.
go through the whole domain authority SEO process, which is expensive and
Yeah.
complicated.
Yeah, completely agree. The key difference here is that in Google or traditionally, if your URL, if your site showed up first, I mean, you win. But in LLMs, the LLM is summarizing many citations based on its pool of information. So you need to get mentioned as many times as possible. It's about frequency of citation across those sources, which is super important. And I think also one thing to kind of note here, the sooner you do this and the more you show up, and people kind of giving feedback saying this is a relevant result, that kind of reinforcement around you were the right result for them and they click on that means you're going to now show up more and more. So you can build quite a bit of authority within the AEO from that reinforcement mechanism as well. A couple examples here. Let's take a look at Reddit in particular, because we talk about that a lot.
Yeah, we do. Reddit is huge for AEO. Third-party content which relies on user opinions carries more weight than brand generated content for most LLMs. ChatGPT, Google's AI mode, all of those rely really heavily on sites like Reddit. And
Mhm.
actually LinkedIn as well. LinkedIn's a big one too. So that's another place where you can go and start to earn some street cred.
But I think where most people get it wrong is they try to hack it, or,
Yeah.
they try that growth hacker approach where you create hundreds of fake Reddit accounts, you auto post comments everywhere, and you try to game the system.
That is not gonna work on
No.
especially on a place like Reddit. Anyone trying to spam is gonna immediately be unsuccessful. Your account's gonna get banned, those comments are gonna get deleted, it's gonna be you're basically gonna get run off of Reddit. Reddit is a very,
Yeah.
they're very aware of those sorts of tactics, so it's not gonna work.
It definitely adds to reputational damage. I've seen it
Yeah.
in so many different threads where someone will post something and then you just have this long chain of people roasting the user. They're like, and you can look, right? So you can see when that user was created and their other
Yep,
posts. So
yep,
you can look at that and go, oh, obviously that's an bot. And then you completely lose all
yeah,
those people that you were trying to reach. So the strategy that works is really simple. Find a thread that's part of a citation you want to show up in, say who you are, say where you work, be honest and upfront, and
yeah,
give useful information. And again, that's all part of that authentic component,
yeah.
like that authenticity of the information you're trying to share.
In that Lenny's Pod interview with Ethan Smith, which again, absolutely go back and listen to. They talk about Webflow, which is one
Mhm.
of their clients, and they have a couple people who work at Webflow who go to the comments, and they are very upfront and very
Mhm.
honest about it, and they say, "This is my name. I work at Webflow. Here's a
Yeah.
useful piece of information." But because it's still part of that authentic conversation, and because they're being honest about who they
Yeah.
are and where they work, that's still useful because people still need to know, stuff
Right.
about website building. But as long as someone's not trying to be sneaky about it, then it's going to be welcomed because they are being authentic.
Absolutely. I see that work all the time where someone
Yeah.
says, hey, here's an answer to your question. Here's something I've tried. Oh, and by the way, this is who I am. This is the company I work for. And this is how we're solving that challenge. I almost, my click rate on that is probably 100%. I'm always looking at that because
Because
they've
they actually
shown,
know what they talk about. They
yeah,
know what they're talking about.
they've shown credibility. They've given a
Yeah.
useful piece of information and they're telling me, hey, I'm trying to solve that problem in the space. I'm like, okay, let me go look at that, right? Let me see what they're doing. You want to
Yeah.
support that level of
Yeah.
authenticity. And the truth is, you don't need 10,000 comments. You don't need to farm all of Reddit at scale. You really are focusing on quality of engagement. So the Reddit strategy is just be an actual user of Reddit. Make an account, say who you are, say where you work, and give useful information and tips, And that will help you build authenticity and credibility.
And honestly, this is how communities should work anyway. Like if you genuinely work at a company that's solving a problem that someone
Mhm.
has, sharing that information from and being helpful is going to be useful for everyone. So that there's actually a benefit to that.
Yep. All right. The next one we have is YouTube. So
Yep.
YouTube videos work really well for AEO. And I think it's particularly powerful for B2B because there's going to be a lot less competition in that space.
Yeah, I mean, there's not that many videos about AI powered payment processing APIs, as thrilling as that is, but
Yeah.
it's a really, really strong term from an AEO perspective because if you're making a video for these really specific questions or topics, there's a
Mhm.
really big opportunity in that because not many people are going to be talking about it. So it's more of an opportunity to be decided.
Yeah, because of the scale of YouTube, you can find these niche audiences where you can answer specific questions for those groups. And again, have really high engagement. And you don't need fancy production for this. Just screen recordings with a voiceover explaining how to solve problems. I mean, the amount of videos I watch
Yeah.
around how to build AI agents from people. And look, they're not sexy. They're not
No.
high quality production, but
No, they are not.
they're informative.
Yeah.
And ultimately, that the AI is going to pull from the transcript. They're not going to care about they're not looking at your lighting or your production value. They don't care about that. They care about how credible and how useful that information is.
Totally. So, like a video about how to integrate X with Y, or what's the difference between A and B, like walkthroughs of specific use cases. Those are all really, really, really quotable for AI engines.
Yeah. And the thing about YouTube where it's a little different with Reddit, where you don't have that community issue, you can make a video and do whatever you want with it. Maybe people view it, maybe they don't, but you can make it and it becomes part of the citation pool.
Okay, so moving on to another source that is particularly useful is publisher relationships and original
Yeah.
research. So this means getting mentioned in industry publications, doing guest posts, participating in podcasts. All of this is going to build your citation pool because it's just getting you out there and talking more.
As we've talked about, AI agents and crawlers focus on authority and credibility. So that includes official websites. And obviously, we've talked a lot about the different New York Times issues and
Mhm.
the partnerships that companies like OpenAI have with some high authority publishers. And then also we've talked about Wikipedia. So getting covered and being published in a lot of trusted publications carries huge amount of weight and probably will continue to be more and more.
And if you create original research or original data, that is also huge.
Mhm.
So that's a white paper, that's industry reports, surveys, data analysis. If you publish something with original data, there's that AI loves to cite a number.
Mhm.
Other articles will start to cite you, and then that just kind of amplifies your citation presence significantly. So that is,
Mhm.
and that is not too dissimilar from SEO. But
Right.
again, it's like how you're writing it, I think, and the way that you're writing it.
Yeah, I think a really good example of this is, according to XYZ company 2025 report, 73% of marketers say blank. That is going to show up in every chat
Yep.
GPT, right? That is like very high authority, very conversational. It's extremely quotable. AI engines love citing specific statistics and data points like
Yeah. We should also flag that if you have money, you can pay a site like or a publication like Forbes to mention you. And then, suddenly you're part of the top 20 best credit cards
Mhm.
according to Forbes. It's expensive, but it's also an option. I should also say that is how people get on the 30 under 30 list. As impressive as it sounds, that is paid for. Just saying.
Yeah. Different tactics for different budgets and strategies.
Yep.
Everyone comes at it
Yep.
differently.
Yep. It's true. Okay, so let's move on to our third pillar, which is measurement and tracking. So you're doing all this work, you're getting all these citations out there, you're engaging with people on Reddit. How do you know if this is actually working?
This is one of the hardest parts because I think the measurement tools are still emerging. That being said, 6 months ago, there was nothing. It was just a
Yeah.
total black box. Now we're starting to see some of those tools come out. And traditional analytics does not cut it. It's just not the same. AI traffic doesn't often result in clicks, as we talk about. So it doesn't show up as typical traffic. You may get a bot that shows up once, but you may be getting thousands of mentions. And so you don't see any of that.
Yeah. And if people aren't visiting your website because everything's taking place in ChatGPT, then
Mhm.
that's not going to show up in your traditional metrics.
So, like,
So,
So your Google Analytics traffic
Yeah.
is now very different
Yeah.
from what you might actually be getting.
Exactly. So, one of the things that you should look at is share of voice. So, that's how often you're showing up across different platforms. So, there are some tracking tools that you can use. SEMrush, which is an SEO tool, actually just unveiled a free AI visibility index tool, which can reveal how brands rank in ChatGPT and Google AI mode. So that's free. So that's a great tool that you should use. SEMrush is generally pretty decent. So there are some things that are out there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's built on data from over 2,500 prompts across a number of industries. It's a good start.
So there's a bunch of other tools out there. Graphite, which is the company that Ethan Smith works for, has one. So there are some, but there's not a ton. I think some other metrics that are important to track are branded search volume. So if people see you mentioned in AI answers, they might Google your brand name later. So that is definitely something that will happen. Direct traffic, people might type your URL in directly after they see you mentioned. Post-purchase surveys, which is a little old school, but is an interesting thing to add in. So, everyone's had those surveys where they say, how did you find us? And they'll have, Google or social media. Add ChatGPT or AI recommendations to your how did you hear about us options, because that should also give you a little bit of guidance.
I think that one's probably the most important thing to do. I've seen that
Yeah.
now on a lot of sites, and I'm actually very quick to use that as the drop down to let people know that's where I'm coming from. And maybe even you want to dissect that a little more in terms of which of these tools, whether it's ChatGPT or Gemini or something like that. But I think this is something you should do literally right now as you're listening to the episode. If you do have drop downs for how people search and find you, go add that right away. Okay, let's hit a few quick frameworks from our research, stuff that actually changes what you can do, what you do tomorrow and what you put into action.
First, content quality. So traditional SEO basically led to everyone rewriting the same articles. So we've all seen this, the same blog post on multiple SaaS platform websites. Like everyone has seen that. And that means that the result is 1 out of 20 pages drives the most traffic or most of the traffic. The rest are just noise. The rest are just filler.
Which is bad customer experience. Most websites, quite frankly, are bad experience. Whereas AEO nudges this in the right direction because ultimately the models reward information gain. So new, specific, authentic, verifiable facts. We talk about statistics being so important. If your page sounds like a remix of the same 20 things, it's not going to get cited well. But if it adds something genuinely useful for each of those pages and explains a concept clearly, then it will.
So concentrate on a few pages that deliver real, unique answers. So stop spreading all your effort across dozens of posts that look exactly like what all your competitors have. That's not going to be useful anymore.
Yeah. The next kind of critical framework is what we call multi-platform reality, which is just a fancy way of saying results vary a lot by all of these different platforms. ChatGPT, Claude, Perplexity, Google AI mode. There's a bunch. But the results vary. So don't optimize for one and call it done. You need to think about how your results show up in all of them.
So think share of voice across multiple systems. So make your content quotable everywhere. So clear claims, sources, structured facts, human readable language, all of that is going to be really important.
And lastly, timing. So with classical SEO, early stage startups often wait. With AEO, you got to start early. Focus on those long tail questions and get credible third-party citations via Reddit and Wikipedia and published articles.
For later stage companies, keep doing what works in SEO. Like we say, AEO stands on the shoulders of SEO, but layer your AEO on top. So deeper FAQs, product specs, comparisons, implementation details, external citations, all of that, just keep building on all of that.
So the bottom line, fewer, better pages with original information, optimize for multiple AI platforms, and start your AEO now.
All right. So that is us for this week. Thank you for listening to Early Adopter.
Quick reminder, this is one of our favorite episodes. So if you're tuning in right now, it's because we're taking a holiday break. And don't worry, we'll be back soon with new stuff in the new year.
Before we go, if you want to join us for our first webinar on the 4th of February, you can find the link in the show notes or head over to maven.com to sign up.
It's going to be a real live conversation with us and Sean. You'll remember him from our 3-part series around AI policy. So this is no script, no corporate speak, no buzzwords or jargon from us. You know how we like to hit that jargon buzzer. It's
Yeah.
just us, you, and some good questions about AI and how to actually use it in your business.
And as always, you can find us on Instagram, TikTok, LinkedIn, and YouTube. We are at early_adopter. Remember, no E in adopter. Send us your AI stories, your questions, your wins, your failures, your own AI gone wrong. As always, we always want to hear from our listeners.
And just remember, there's no E in the adopter.
Thanks for listening, and we will see you in the new year.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy holidays, everyone.
Bye.